So we'll call to order this Finance Committee meeting for May 19th, 2021, time 6:49.
Let me take a, do you need me, Mary, for this?
You don't have to, but this is on the OPED
Okay.
and the presentation. So if you would like to listen in, great. But if you need to go,
Yeah, I probably
Frank
need to go
already
at this
left.
point.
It's okay. Frank left.
I had a late start today for work. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
thank you,
Bye-bye now.
Stephen.
Hi,
Bye-bye.
Steve.
So did you want to take a roll call?
Yes. Chairman Silvestri,
Oh, present.
Christine Joy,
Present.
Sandra Wright,
Present.
and as staff, Charlie Kilmer
Present.
and Brenda Robeson
Present.
and Mary Waldron. And I have Frank, who's not in the conference room. We'll just add
Every
that
once in a while, he walks past the doorway.
Yeah, I know. But Mr. Chair, I turn this back over to you.
Okay. So how did you want to?
I just think a general discussion about some next steps. I think, pardon me, let me just get out of where I'm in here. I think there is, we've had the two presentations. There were no council members who volunteered to try to be on a task force to have the discussion. So hence doing it through the finance meeting I think it makes a lot of sense anyway, because it would have to have at least some impact. But one of the things that I was able to do, and I did have some conversation with Charlie and with Brenda, and I'm just looking for my notes that I pulled together. Sorry, if you can bear with me. It was from Monday morning. So there was a couple things that we ended up talking about, and that was, really on a, some of the discussions as it relates to, how do we compare? Are we comparing the two of the same products? Charlie, you had mentioned, I think at one point it was mentioned in the presentation that the state might also have a product, and do we need to do that and compare to them? You know what I mean? So
Mary, can I interrupt you for a second and just do a disclosure, which I need to do? I will accuse myself from all and any discussion regarding this subject on the OPEB. And if there's any vote or anything, I'll refer it back to the council. Thank you.
perfect. Thank you. So in terms of I guess, between Doug and Christine, I think people were impressed with both presentations. Sorry, I am looking again. Maybe Charlie, you had some comments that we had from our Monday morning with Brenda. Maybe you'd like to kind of weigh in.
Sure, thanks, Mary. So, just some of the things we had talked about was, what is the load fee, for example, between Rockland Trust and Peacock? And with Rockland Trust, it's 0.6, and Peacock was lower at 0.2. The treasurer talked about a hypothetical if OCPC had gone with Peacock over the same time period, what would be our return? And he came up with a higher number. And something I noted was the fact that I believe from his presentation, what he had done was he used the growth fund from Peacock versus the balance fund from Rockland Trust, which is a different investment scenario. So you're comparing apples to oranges on the rate of return. To be honest with you, because Peacock had 4 investment options, balanced fund is one of them. If you wanted to do a direct comparison, I would suggest comparing the Peacock Balanced Fund versus the Peacock Rockland Trust Fund to get a direct comparison. In sum total, the return on the Rockland Trust since 2013 has been about 6.5% annually. OCPC has invested about $480,000 of that $800,000. So, got my notes here. So about $200,000 in in investment returns. So, I mean, we've definitely made money in Rockland Trust. Could we do better if we had a different investment fiduciary? It's possible, but I think it'd be hard pressed to say that I would say most everybody made money in the market over the last 10 years. If you looked at the 10-year trailing trend, it'd be hard to lose money. So, because the market's been way up. So,
Any comments in terms of what Charlie, Charlie, I just pulled up your email that you had sent to me. So, you know, the establishment of formal trust agreement, this is from the Rockland Trust presentation, the implement and carry out provisions of Chapter 32B, Section 20, name trustees and define powers, expendable for beneficiaries, retirees, and their dependents, not subject to the creditor claims, IRS section, special purpose government.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, both Barbara in the presentation in March and then Treasurer O'Brien brought it up at the presentation in April that there, regardless of what we do with the OPEB investment, whether to stay where we are or go with somebody else, there is still some work to do regardless of a change in investment vehicle or not. And both of them recognize that, and that's where it's not because we didn't do anything that we were supposed to, it's that the government in GASB changed some of the requirements. And that's that, to be honest with you, I think that, you know, I would have hoped that Rockland Trust would have brought it up other than that presentation to the board and the finance committee. They should have notified us to do that. And to Treasurer O'Brien's point is like, well, you know, if you're with us, we're up to speed with this and we would have let you know. So, you know, just, you know, the Peacock talked about the more personal attention and the personal relationship nature of the investments. So,
During Rockland Trust's presentation, did they mention other municipalities that have been with them?
I don't recall them providing a client list.
Yeah.
I
I
think,
only say that because Treasurer O'Brien's, I mean, it's tough to argue against the success, you know, because he talks about all these municipalities and then all these other ones that he wants to gain on top of that, you know. But
Yeah.
then again, like you said, you got to really ask yourself, is it worth the change? And that's
So-
where the numbers are going to come in.
sorry. So I think not only worth the change. So one of the things I had Brenda, because she did receive a new updated report that now has Bruce on the list. Because I was saying, where's Bruce on this? And that was from March, but he showed up in April for whatever reason. And you know, I just wanted to wrap my head around why this is created. So I get, right, to have the funds be available. Brenda, you received an email. Did you get an explanation on that?
Oh, you know what? No, I did not. You know, I wrote to Jeffrey Lepore, but then, you know, he never responded back. And then the fact that it came, I just think there's probably a waiting period. That is what I'm assuming. Unless they missed it, and then basically because of my email, they were like, "Oh, oops, we're missing someone on this list."
Right.
I don't know. We weren't paying for him. You know,
No, but
yeah,
one of the
so-
things that list that you provided was really helpful to see. I mean, there are 1, 2,
Yeah.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people right on it.
Yep.
You know, and then you can't help but draw your eye to, you know, the amount that's being paid out and, you know, who's the highest, and it's the choice of the health insurance and the benefits, right? Because that's what they were getting as an employee. And I would never recommend to make changes to that. But, you know, do we have a choice in if we're going to be paying out that we pay up to a certain amount? If someone gets the most premium, do we pay like up to 900 or 600? And I don't know. I just don't know any of this. And the fact that, again, as more information is being, you know, provided, it provides just I guess, more questions. Again, not condemning, not looking to change things, but just asking the questions. So I said to Brenda, I said, all right, so this, we know when it was established, but I said back then in 2012, 13, thank you. See, I was close, I was getting there. But right, so 2013, so the purpose this was there was because if we don't have the monies at OCPC, that we have this account that can be, it pays out, or what's the amount we can't pay out? Yes, Charlie.
So I don't recall if it was, I think it was GASB 34 said that you had municipalities and entities had to start recognizing the OPEB liability on their books. What it didn't require was for the entity to fund it. So the idea with creating an OPEB trust is you pre-fund the liability by making investments in the market or some way that the investments will help offset the overall costs over a 20-year horizon. So in our case, for example, you mentioned retiree OPEB benefits.53 it's about $4,300 a month.
Right.
So if you extrapolate that out to a year, that's about $53,000. So when Brenda is providing the financial report at the council meeting to say, well, the OPEB trust went up $18,000 over the last month, that's kind of the delta of how, your investments. So over the life of the OPEB trust account that we've made about $200,000 in returns on top of what OCPC has invested on an annual basis. And that's basically how we get to, round numbers, 809,000. I know it's up to 833 now, but so we've made about $200,000. So in effect, that pays for 4 years of current retiree health and dental insurance that we would have had to pay out of pocket. So we've saved $200,000 basically.
And at some point the account maxes out, correct?
So that's where the actuarial analysis comes in. That's that Parker Elmore Odyssey Investors. What they will come up is with a 20-year liability cost of your retirees from today out 20 years. Basically for OCPC, it's $1.3 million as a 20-year cost. And the OPEB fund right now is at about 830. So it's about 70% funded. So the question that we were kind of kicking around the office was like, well, at what point do we start making withdrawals from it to help offset the current OPEB liability versus do we slow down what OCPC puts into it on an annual basis, or do we wait till it's fully funded before we pull any money out of it?
Well, they suggest waiting until it's fully funded. She's when I talked to Barbara actually just today, she said that every single municipality that with these accounts, nobody pulls out of it to pay those monthly premiums. And she suggests not pulling out of it until it's fully vested. I mean, I got some information today, but I still have to dig into it and get some more. I talked to her on my way home from the office, so I didn't get to ask.
That's the thing where some municipalities may never get to the fully funded spot because they just can't afford to do that. So in effect, they're never going to technically withdraw from it if they can never get to fully funded.
Yeah.
So I think, Mr. Chair, and to Christine, as well as I know, Sandy, you're listening. I mean, Charlie probably has said this, what he just said, like probably 1,000 times, but it's finally taking time to kind of peel back and take the time to kind of do a hard stop to have the discussion. Looking at, first of all, the purpose of it, right? In terms of the state being not GASB mandating that this account has to be set up, not mandating that it has to be funded, but we're as Charlie said, we're at 70%. That's a good place to be in. So if we're looking to have an account be making lots of money, which is always a good thing to be thinking about, but if we're still paying out of pocket for those monthly or for the yearly expenses of, call it roughly $50,000 for the benefits of retirees, because we are obligated and we're want to make sure our employees are continuing and what have you. You know, it just somehow I'm just like I'm trying to wrap my head around that in terms of, well, if this account if we're paying into, then at what point can we not have it come out of OCPC funds, that it can come out of the OPEB account?
I think that might be an opportunity to Brenda's point about the conversation with Barbara is perhaps like a peer example of some of our communities. What are they doing?
Mm.
How are they approaching it in terms of?
Yeah.
She did tell me,
Yeah,
she told me just today that none of them,
yeah.
they all are doing exactly what we're doing. Just funding it each month and paying the insurance
pocket.
premium.
Are their funding amounts been the same? Do they have any
That I
cutback?
didn't ask. That I didn't ask. I mean, we've been funding it for a lot of years, way more than we needed to, which is
Right.
probably why our balance is so
If-
high.
If I'm correct,
This year we cut it.
sorry, Brenda.
You cut it to 60, I
That's
think.
okay.
Yeah, I'm correct in this, I think the Plymouth County Treasurer's Office, I think they're like the city of Brockton. So you could just imagine how many retirees the city of Brockton has, right? I mean, think about that in terms of some of the smaller towns is one thing, but it's still, that's the whole projection of, you know, the whole odyssey and the projecting of longevity and yada, yada, yada. So
I just did some quick arithmetic. So if our goal is to reach $1.3 million in the OPEB trust before we start to withdraw at the current OCPC investment of $30,000 annually, and not including any from this point forward, just say there was zero return on investments, it would take us 16 and a half years before we're fully funded.
Thank God for those return on investments, huh?
So, I mean, just
God.
without knowing what that return would be, you know, let's shave off 6.5 years and say fully funded in 10 years as a reasonable guesstimate
Yeah.
before we would start to withdraw.
So I think this is a good reason to have this kind of conversation. I think there's a couple takeaways. I think it's important to find out from Rockland Trust. Let's see who their clients are and which communities. I think I may have said, let's take a look at, see what the other regional planning agencies has. I think just Steve, I know, had a sidebar conversation with David Klein, because he's from Abington, and just said impressed in terms of Treasurer O'Brien's presentation. You know, I think a number of us just walked away about, obviously charismatic in terms of what he presents, but just knowing the details. So as where I said, I would probably say not rush into a decision, but I think to not sit on the decision either, right? Let's not just say, okay, in a year, let's revisit this. Let's keep asking some of the questions that I know Charlie, and I know Brenda, I think you had some questions too that you wanted to raise too.
I think the locality of the whole thing is a huge thing as well. I mean, like you said, I mean, Rockland Trust is huge. You know, I'm sure they have tons of clients, and the response time might not be what it could be. You know, you talk about Treasurer O'Brien's presentation. I mean, you know, him being where he is in that distance is, I mean, that's a selling point in and of itself, to be honest with you.
Yeah, my takeaway from this basically is that we're going to be fully funded much faster with the PCOT than we will with Rockland Trust. So, but you know, we need to move in a direction or stay where you are comfortable too. And if you'd prefer to stay with Rockland Trust, I think that, well, that's, we need to do that. But if we want to be a little bit more aggressive and have this thing fully funded at a faster rate, I think we really need to look at PCOT. I think you're going to get much better support from the team that Tom has with PCOT. But I'm absolutely open-minded here. Whatever is best for the employees and the council, that's the direction that we need to go, and to be in your comfort zone. I don't want anybody to feel like we're being pushed into a direction that makes people uncomfortable. Because it's a lot of money we've got in there.
It is. And I think you're doing your due diligence. I think the questions that have been asked, I would think, this special meeting was really just to kind of have the conversation after both presentation. And Charlie, you had mentioned, I think, in our Monday morning meeting with Brenda that it was referred to, I think, by Treasurer O'Brien about the state also has their own plan. So even just to do a comparison of a third, and thought it was pretty expensive. So I think there's still some further research that we need to do. I had not formally followed up with Treasurer O'Brien and his team because I wanted to thank them, because the head was a little overwhelmed because it was a long night. But let me first reach out, and then let's come up with the staff between Brenda, Charlie, and I think we have them anyway from our Monday meeting, but let's bring them together and flush it out. I think we can certainly, where we are right now isn't necessarily hurting us. So it's not like we're in danger or it's putting us in a negative position. So where we stand right now is good. But I do think for us to continue to ask both the Rockland Trust and Treasurer O'Brien's office some questions and vet them out, and let's hold another meeting. It could be just because where we are with terms of budgets and preparing, so there's a bit of a timing of an issue. But if it's not next month, let's put it maybe for the month of July. It gives us enough time to have some dialogue. Let us get through our budget. And then maybe in July, we just really kind of pull the team again together to have the discussion about what we came up. And if there's items that we find that, listen, we found this out and what we found this out, I will reach, I can always reach out and let's call another special meeting of the finance meeting to vet it through. I think that's our best step for everyone, for the existing and for finances and looking at how we're going to proceed.
Mary, can I make a suggestion?
Please.
Can we get how our fund would have performed had Rockland Trust had us in a growth fund, so that we can compare apples to apples versus PCOT, rather than having PCOT, downgrade? What could we have expected if they would have had us in the same type of fund that PCOT does?
I thought Tom O'Brien did that toward the end of his presentation or something
Did he?
similar to that. I have to.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think obviously he put the slide in the presentation because it was a growth.
Right,
It was
it's
a bigger growth.
substantial, exactly.
Yeah,
But
Plymouth
I
County
remember,
had-
I'm sorry, Charlie, go ahead.
Yeah, Plymouth County in Treasurer O'Brien's slide, he had 4 investment options. In the middle 2 were balance and then in the growth. And to his point, he said, well, most of the clients are in the growth fund. That's the original one that they started with, and that's one where they have most of their clients in. And if OCPC had done the growth fund over the same time period, he would have been at X. And what I was
Okay.
trying to find was actually that presentation, because I have an earlier version. I don't have the version he
that he
actually presented
presented.
at the meeting, because he added a couple slides at the end. Because that was, I think at the finance committee, that was one of the questions that one of you on the board had brought up was, could you show like a rate of return or something? So he came prepared to the full council with a different presentation, had some extra slides on the end of it. But to Christine's point, if Barbara could go back and say, well, instead of doing the balanced fund in the Rockland Trust, the next higher level for Rockland Trust, what would have our investment be? And that's just a conversation between OCPC and Rockland Trust.
Mhm. And can we move it? That was up to us, right? We
Mhm.
could
Yeah,
each
there's no fee
year.
for changing it.
Okay,
Yeah,
There's no penalty.
Yeah.
because that might be something we want to consider too, is moving to
Yeah.
a more aggressive fund with them.
So let me do this, because I do know, I was trying to like look for it quickly on my email while you guys were chatting. They did send it late to me just before the committee meeting, and so I was scrambling a little bit. So I will send that presentation out to everyone
Mhm.
so you can take another look at it. Because you're right, Charlie, they had sent a that they had at the finance meeting before the council meeting, and then they tweaked it. And so I'll find that and I'll send that out to everyone. And so having that comparison, I think, is a good way of doing it. And Charlie had mentioned, right, the Rockland Trust, how they had theirs was a different scale as opposed to Plymouth County. But again, right, at least from where I sit, I think any and all these questions are really important. It goes back to the transparency of what we're doing. It doesn't say that Rockland Trust is doing a terrible job. It just says, how do we, let's look at it holistically and vet it out and have those comparisons to be as close as we can. So then you as council members, I know for a fact that none of you have anything but goodwill for employees and for the retirees. Just knowing how do we, number one, control the cost, and then also see some cost savings is really kind of, you have to have that, being that compassionate realist, right? You got to have that fiscally responsible, yet at the same point, you got to be compassionate about things. So it's a balance, and that's what I think all that you're doing. So I, I would be lying to you if I think that if there was been, where we had Rockland Trust come in August and then they came back again, they're pretty responsive about being there. Now it's just a matter of, I think, to the growth aspect and where we could have been, where we should be. And, I think it was some of our evaluation is that with Plymouth County in terms of it's a young account, it's 2015 or something like that, right? Again, that's okay to say those things because it's the truth, but then let's see how we want to move forward. So give us some time. I think let's get through next week's meeting. I think give us through June, but maybe we set up something, Doug, to then have a further discussion, and perhaps when we do that internal discussion, then perhaps if we need to bring them back to have some follow-up questions, and then that way you can make a better decision asking them the questions instead of us having to answer for them.
Mary, yeah, I agree. But the thing is, I would expect Rockland Trust to be responsive. We have $800,000 in their bank. That's a lot of money. And frankly, we are in much better shape than most of the cities and towns
Right.
that we represent. So OCPC has done an outstanding job funding this. So, regardless of what we decide, we are in really good shape.
We're lucky.
It's just, we're very lucky that that OCPC really jumped on this when they did, and we've been putting big chunks of money in it. So whatever we decide, I think we'll be in good shape.
Great. So we'll do our due diligence. We'll come up with some questions. I'll get them back to you. I will share the PowerPoint that the treasurer provided. That was the amended one. And as we move along, I think perhaps even if it's just here's a check-in with each other, we could utilize the finance committee before the meetings to say, hey, where are we with OPED? We could even have it as an agenda item, Madam Chair, in terms of as we move forward, this is the committee. I think we should do a reporting out of this is where we met, and these are some of the things we're going to talk about, because people say, okay, we just sat through 2 hours of presentation, like now what, right? And I think that's the one thing that you don't want to particularly do for people that listen to it and want to either enjoy it or flip through it, to not have any kind of action taken. So I'll place it on the agenda item, and we can just do a reporting out either through the treasurers, or we can do that through you, Christine, either way.
Yeah, or how about Doug? About Doug do a report through the finance committee?
I think that's great.
Beautiful.
And Doug, what I'll do is I'll draft something up for you, and I'll have Brenda and Charlie take a look at it before I do, just to kind of just do a little paragraph about what we just talked about today.
Yeah, that's fine. Just send it to me beforehand. That way I can just get a look at it. And
You mean like 2 seconds before isn't good enough, right?
maybe 10.
It's not like it hasn't happened before, but and I just, while Charlie and Brenda are both on this, I mean, as you can tell, Charlie is not only incredible in terms of the knowledge about the account, that historic information is really important, but also having his expertise in terms of knowing Gatsby and knowing the input and knowing, the Odyssey in terms of the assessment, and as well as with Brenda. And so I think those are our next steps, and we'll keep you posted, not only for the meeting, we'll have it up on the finance meeting for the June meeting, to then have another update for the June meeting where we are, and then really kind of ideally we'll kind of get to the point of maybe a decision in July. Does that
Sounds
work,
good.
Charlie?
No, that sounds great. I think it's an exciting time, and it's good to look at our options. And it's a valuable exercise because it is a lot of money, as Christine said, and it's we're investing in the future. And I'll be honest with you, some of the important things that I tend to think about is what's the rate of return, what are the fees, what's the credibility of the entity, what's the customer service. And I was really impressed by the customer service aspect of PCOT. It seems like that they're going to be right there. They're a phone call away or an email. They're more than just an investing house.
Right.
They're going to give you guidance and they're willing to talk to you. With Rockland Trust, sometimes it's like they check in with you once a year, and it's like that's it, and you have to ask them, and they're not calling you. I don't know.
We also have our commercial loan with them.
And
that's-
and it's just,
right.
well, it's like, thanks for nothing. Here's your 800 grand.
Right.
What are we getting for it?
Right.
Well, and that's where like the customer service aspect is seems a little higher on the PCOT.
Yep.
And the fees are lower.
So we'll work on that. Appreciate having you guys have back-to-back meetings, personnel. As you can see, we're making some further inroads, and and it's just getting busier as we get along the way, but it's good. It's moving forward. So thank you, Mr. Chair and members. And Sandra, who's been on mute, the poor thing.
No, I'm off mute. But quiet.
Well, I think the fact that we are there is a philosophical just about talking about, it's not talking about a specific program, just again the integrity and cost savings along the way. So there's your cat. That's okay.
It's a dog.
It's a dog.
Cat's in
Oh,
the
I'm
house.
sorry. I've got my glasses on too. Sorry, Doug.
It's okay. He's all right.
I think with that, Mr. Chair, I think we're good, and I'll put together just some action statements after.
Sounds good. Do we make a motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
All right. Awesome. Thank you very much. I thought it was a great conversation.
Same here. Thank you.
Okay, see you all tomorrow.
Good night.
See you later.
We're here tomorrow.